What is a vampire's favorite type of dog? A bloodhound. What do you get if you cross a vampire and a laptop? Love at first bite. I know a vampire who became a poet. He went from bat to verse. Oh, that's actually a good one. See, vampires can be funny. Welcome to Teacup For One. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and welcome to Vampire Weekend's grand finale. Nope, still not them. Now, we've already looked at the 2 original vampires, Nosferatu and Dracula, and how their films impacted popular culture. But today, we are fast-forwarding decades and looking at a modern classic, the 2014 vampire mockumentary, What We Do in the Shadows. Now, this was my first time watching this film, and I loved it. It was hilarious. You could say the humor killed me. No, but seriously, I know I'm probably the last person in the world to get around to seeing this movie, but just in case, here's a quick synopsis. What We Do in the Shadows is a mock documentary, or mockumentary, about 4 vampire roommates who are living in modern-day New Zealand. We get a look at their day-to-day lives as centuries-old beings who are living in the modern world. Some of them have adjusted better than others, and we get to see how all of them adjust when a new vampire joins their community. Despite my labor-intensive Wikipedia research, I'm not a vampire scholar whatsoever, but I have seen my fair share of vampire comedy movies, and this one is just leaps, steps, and bounds above all the others. And I think that's because it finds the comedy in the existing conventions of the vampire movie genre instead of just making fun of the vampire movie genre. In fact, this whole movie plays out almost like a celebration of the vampire film, and I could almost argue that every character represents a different era in vampire movie making. And you know what? In fact, I'm going to make that argument for you right now. I had to do it. I've spoken about genre theory on the channel before, but as a quick recap, any film genre starts off in the primitive stage. So that's when a film is wholly original and then its idea has the seeds of something really exciting that are in its infancy. In terms of vampire films, that would be 1922's Nosferatu, the earliest surviving vampire movie we have. No thanks to Florence Belcombe. No, I'm sorry, full respect to Florence Belcombe, they should have paid you. What We Do in the Shadows obviously knows its vampire history because Peter the vampire clearly represents Nosferatu. He looks exactly like Count Orlok right down to the teeth. His pale look, plus the fact that he hardly speaks, makes him like a silent movie character brought into the realm of the talkies. And he's the only vampire that we actually see perish after direct exposure to sunlight, which is part of vampire mythology that Nosferatu fully created. After its primitive stage, a film genre will evolve into what we call the classic, or the classical stage. This is when we start seeing all of the tropes that are going to set the standards and expectations for subsequent films within this genre. Perfect example for the vampire film would be the Bela Lugosi Dracula. In Shadows, the classical vampire is being represented by Taika Waititi's character, Viago. He has all the classic traits of the Bela Lugosi Dracula. He is a vampire and a gentleman. He will suck your blood, but first he's going to make sure you're comfortable because he is a gracious host. He's got it all. Charm, charisma, that's pretty much all he's got. And he's got the trademark Lugosi hair and accent, plus he is our host on this mockumentary. He is the one who is welcoming us in to see little bits and pieces of his interior life. And it only makes sense that that role is being filled by the classical vampire.
Awaken! Awakey, wakey!
Okay, so after a genre has lived through its classical stage, that's when audiences start to know what to expect and you run the risk of getting bored. So, you have to then play with expectations. And then that's when we move into the genre's revisionist stage, or as it's more likely known today, the gritty reboot stage. So, for example, that's when Adam West Batman turns into Christian Bale, or the Archie kids turn into the Riverdale gang, whatever that show is. Now, off the top of my head, I would say the best example of revisionist vampire literature would probably be the works of Anne Rice. And I actually mean, I suspect, because I've never read an Anne Rice book, I've never seen an Anne Rice movie, I know the bare basics, so please do correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I understand, her novels humanize the vampires. Now, vampires have historically always been creatures that represent lust and objects of desire, but a lot of that just comes from the perspective of us, the mortals, objectifying them. But what about the vampires? Have we ever thought about the fact that the vampires might have feelings too? The vampires might have emotions too? What we think we know as a vampire might not actually be what is a vampire. So, judging purely off of his flowy shirt and the fact that he's outright described as the young rebellious one at only 183 years old, I think it's pretty clear that Deacon represents our revisionist vampire. He's at odds with all the vampire traditions, and he's always butting heads with the older generations. And then finally, after a genre has cycled through its primitive phase, its classical phase, its revisionist phase, you finally hit a bit of a wall, and then we get to either the parodic stage, where the audiences know what to expect, they've seen this type of story done to death, and all that's left to do is make fun of it. Or the deconstructive phase, where the audience has seen this story done to death, and all that's left to do is to reinvent it by creating a hybrid with another genre. And What We Do in the Shadows manages to do both. Almost every other vampire comedy film, like Dracula Dead and Loving It or Transylvania Twist, which probably only I've seen, create the comedy by making fun of the vampires and putting them into an over-the-top cartoony world.
Children of the night. What a mess they make. I am Count... Dracula.
But the reason What We Do in the Shadows is so good and so funny is because it treats the vampires totally seriously. Even the one that has all of the classic Bela Lugosi traits, all of those traits are there subtly, and they don't take away from his humanity as a serious character. The comedy comes from the fact that these vampires are trying to live in a contemporary society. And because it's structured as a documentary, they get to touch on, everything having to do with vampire lore. There's the one character, Vladislav, I think his name is, who's very clearly a personification of Vlad the Impaler, who inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula, and they get to touch on vampires throughout art history. And I think my favorite part of the movie is when they show one of those classic medieval paintings of an animal with a human face, and they say, oh yes, Vlad used to be very good at transforming into animals, except he kind of forgot what they look like and he's lost his touch. And then you see animals that actually have a human face. Anyway, the point is, I can't recommend this movie enough. It's funny, it's clever, it's scary, and it's just this perfect tribute to all things vampires. It is the perfect way to wrap up Vampire Weekend. But for now, friends, that concludes yet another episode of Teacup For One. Let me know in the comment section down below, what is your favorite vampire movie? And if you want to follow me for the rest of my Halloween spooky movie marathon, but you haven't subscribed to the channel, how are you going to know when I upload a new video? Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Do it now. Do it. Do it. It's super easy. All you have to do is click on my face. There it is. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup For One. I had to do one more.